So, I have a confession to make. I'm no fool. I tried cheating in Halo Infinite Team SWAT, or as they weirdly call it now, Tactical Slayer. In that, I tried playing in 4x3 stretched, and stretching it all the way out to ultra-wide. I've actually installed Halo Infinite on my main PC lately to play on my ultra-wide, big fancy 3440 by 1440 100 Hz monitor. It's a lower refresh rate, but I get a lot of field of view from it, and I figured it's a good way for me to just be limited to the controller because my wireless mouse cannot be used for gaming, and try to learn controller. And I've watched BBK's videos on setting my dead zones and everything, and suddenly, for the first time since the Xbox 360, I feel like I'm capable of playing Halo on a controller again, which feels phenomenal. But then he was experimenting with getting the 4x3 or 5x4 stretch going, and I was thinking, I was like, wow, I'm literally playing on an ultra-wide now. What if I took that concept and ran with it? And oh boy, the results were not what I expected. You can watch his full video for a breakdown of why you might want to do this and how you can do it, but suffice to say, taking it a step further from 4x3 stretched to 16x9 and then stretching it further to 21x9 was pretty wild. Things get really distorted, and admittedly for the first couple games, especially running at a high refresh rate, it was kind of giving me a headache, but I got used to it pretty quickly. So I felt like it was a good kind of training ground to get used to playing on controller for the first time, seriously, in a long time. And maybe get a little advantage there from the chunkier bodies. And yeah, it made players' bodies really chunky. But as I played, the more I played, I actually played quite a few matches. My very first match I played, and the one I submitted for BBK's video, at least first match of Team SWAT, I did pretty well. It wasn't like a flawless or anything, but it was one of the better games I've had in Infinite, given how much I feel like it sucks on mouse. That was all the time I could dedicate for the day, but I was over the moon. I was like, wow, this really does make a difference. I'm stoked. Turns out I'm just really good at that map, and I'm not so great at other maps. As I went on, I had a kind of mixed bag experience as to whether I felt like, I was doing well in the first place. Obviously, there's going to be some degree of skill-based matchmaking going on, kind of trying to balance out my skill level. I probably had a lot of really bad back-to-back games in Team SWAT before, and so it was putting me up against newbies, and then I won a bunch, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, let's course correct for that. And then it really started to kind of show exactly the impact that stretch had. 4x3 stretching to 21x9, it gives you, in a sense, a visibility advantage in that you get to see bigger bodies. So whenever you see the Spartan body, you're more likely to see it and you can react to that. Obviously, you're missing half of your field of view by only having a 4x3 view. So you are missing a good chunk of your normal field of view you'd have even at 16x9, and especially compared to what I'd have at 21x9 ultra wide. So you're missing some of the sides, but for whatever is right in front of you, you have a massive visibility boost for seeing enemy players. The problem is that what this does, this stretching of your field of view by stretching the aspect ratio, it squishes your vertical field of view. So you stretch out your wide field of view and it squishes the vertical, which means, yeah, I can see the bodies, but I absolutely cannot differentiate the heads from the bodies, and that becomes a problem. Especially because, I was specifically playing Team SWAT. Team SWAT was a game mode that I loved in Halo 3 and Halo Reach, and absolutely adored. It helped to make up for some of the netcode issues. It helped, make up for when I was playing solo, you don't have as much team shooting going on, so by being a lone wolf, I could basically play it like Call of Duty and have a blast. And it was good just aiming practice because you could only aim for the head, so it was a good way, challenge to make sure you're always aiming for heads when you're playing. Between the squished bodies to where it felt like the heads kind of didn't exist above the shoulders of the player models, and the fact that the crosshair is just so chunky in Halo Infinite, even at higher resolutions, and I really feel, or wish rather, that we could kind of scale it down because we're do our own, choose a crosshair or something, because I feel like it blocks my visibility a lot. But between those two things, I actually found that, yeah, I was seeing enemy players really well and being able to respond to where they were really well, but suddenly I was having intermittently a much worse time, especially at distances, actually hitting their head, because as far as I could tell, I was crosshaired on their head, but really I was probably hitting them in the upper chest or something, and that's pretty wild. So as I played through the games, I kind of experimented and I ended up changing it up. I was like, all right, that was 4x3 stretch. Let's do 16x9 stretched out to ultra wide. That way I regain some of my field of view, but I'm still going for the stretched, chunkier bodies. And honestly, this did not look that much further away from how it normally looked at native 21x9, which was pretty interesting. But at this point, I didn't really feel like I was gaining anything from it and just felt like I was making the game look like butt. And so ended up, you know, it was potentially the best training wheels to get used to playing on controller again after being a diehard mouse and keyboard player since the Xbox One came out. And suddenly I felt like all the controllers felt like garbage. It was really good training wheels between that and the optimizations that BBK posted to help me fine-tune my controller settings that I suddenly feel like I'm completely competent on controller again when I felt like I would never be able to go back to controllers ever again in my life, which was insane. But I don't think long-term it makes sense to play at. I don't feel like you get a significant enough advantage, especially if you're playing the normal game modes where it's not one-hit kill. I don't know. I don't think it's for me, but it was a very interesting experiment, and it was interesting to see, like, the progress of thinking it was giving me an advantage because I was seeing people quicker, but then realizing that I was actually struggling to hit their heads more. And it was kind of fun. So this was my brief venture into sort of cheating in Halo Infinite SWAT, even though it's obviously not cheating. It's something you can just do with any game, but it's something pros do in a lot of games because apparently they just aim worse than we all thought. But it was a lot of fun. Have you tried out 4x3 stretch in any of your favorite FPSs? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, remember, be kind, rewind.